We begin then this morning with those latest poll numbers from NBC News that are painting a bleak picture for the state of the country.
3 out of 4 Americans say the country is headed in the wrong direction, and a record 58% of Americans believe the country's best days are now behind us. Americans also hold a negative view of both political parties, with a slightly less favorable view of the Democratic Party compared to the GOP.
The same can be said about our current and former president. 48% of Americans polled have a negative view of President Biden. That number is 54% for former President Trump. And when it comes to the current investigations into our former president, 57% of voters believe they should continue, while 40% say they should stop.
We have full coverage for you this morning, from the latest on the investigations into the former president to what these polls mean for the upcoming elections. Let's start by delving into those polls with NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray and NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba. So, Mark, give us the big picture here. What do these polls mean for both parties right now as we head into the midterms?
Yeah, Joe, we're now less than 3 months away from the midterms, and I think this poll is really shouting at us that we are entering uncharted waters right now. In the traditional metrics of a midterm season, when you look at a president's job rating, the direction of the country, the generic ballot, they all point in the direction of the Republican Party having a very successful midterm season. But some other numbers really stand out in the poll, and that is increasing Democratic enthusiasm, where Democrats have now drawn even with Republicans on having high interest in the midterm elections. You end up having a situation where the number one issue is threats to democracy rather than cost of living. And then, as you mentioned earlier, there's that Donald Trump factor out there, with not only his poor numbers, but also 57% of voters believing that the investigations into him could continue. And so while a lot is looking like this could be a 2006, 2010, 2018 kind of midterm environment that's really bad for the party controlling the White House and Congress, there are other numbers in there that suggest that this could be a much different kind of midterm environment than we've seen before.
Monica, let's now talk about these numbers that we have for President Biden. 55% disapprove of the job that the president is doing. Now, this is even, of course, after this string of recent legislative victories. So you wonder if, at least in part, is this a messaging issue? And then also tell us if the White House is trying to do anything to turn this around.
Yeah, the poll was taken after one of arguably the most productive periods of the Biden presidency so far, with all that action on Capitol Hill, the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Semiconductor Act, all of these things that the president had been wanting to do and that had been stalled earlier in the year. But then you also look at the strong jobs numbers and some of the other factors that were going on at the time. And that's right, it didn't really move the president's numbers by very much. And so now the White House has this major challenge, and they're going to send him out on the road, basically, and attempt to try to sell these things. But a lot of that was hindered in July when the president was going to visit a bunch of battleground states. And then he got COVID. And in the last week or so, he's been on his working vacation. So starting next week, he's going to be hitting the road, I'm told, and going to all these places he meant to try to now take this and try to message it to the American people. But we saw this last year, too, where the president himself sometimes admits he's not the best messenger. So it's going to be a challenge, and it's one the White House is certainly aware of right now. Savannah.
Mark, let's talk about a different kind of poll. We're going to get another look at how voters are feeling this week, notably with primaries in Florida and New York. For once, these are less about a Trump-backed candidate versus a non-Trump-backed candidate. What are we looking for come this week?
Yeah, Joe, the primary season is starting to finally come to an end. We've been talking about these all the way back through in March and May, but the New York and Florida primaries are starting to be the very end. We'll have a few more in September. And what I'm watching for are in New York are some congressional primaries where the redistricting map has really re-scrambled things, and you end up having a situation where many or a handful of Democratic members are fighting to keep their jobs with new districts and with the new maps. There's also a really interesting special election that's occurring in New York that's in a swingy part of the state that could be a very interesting bellwether for November. And then in Florida, it's all about the general election for me. Ron DeSantis will be getting his Democratic challenger for that general election. And while there's not a significant primary action, that general election between incumbent Marco Rubio and Val Demings in that Senate contest will also be something we'll be watching over the next 3 months.
Monica, we're also learning that First Lady Jill Biden has now tested negative for COVID and is ending her quarantine. Before we let you guys go, just tell us how she's doing.
Yeah, she tested positive while she and the president were on vacation in South Carolina about 6 days ago. So she has now tested negative twice. They waited for the results of 2 of those tests to make sure that she could end isolation. So she's now going to be traveling to Delaware to meet and be with the president. They're going to be in Rehoboth Beach for the next couple of days, wrapping up that working vacation. And the First Lady notably also was taking Paxlovid, that antiviral that the president took, remember, before having that rebound infection. So that's something also that the First Lady's office will be watching for. But they do tell me that all of her symptoms are gone and she's feeling quite well now.
All right, Monica Alba, Mark Murray, thank you both.
Thank you. Now we're going to turn to that polling about the investigations into former President Trump. 57% of voters believe that they should continue.
That number comes amid the mounting legal issues facing Trump, including the search of his Mar-a-Lago estate and the investigation into his possible involvement in the January 6th attack on the Capitol.
Let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos and NBC News justice reporter Ryan Riley. Ryan, we will start with you. Just first tell us where things do stand on the search of Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate and what we know now.
Yeah, so we're now 2 weeks out from the search, which is tough to sort of calculate because it seems like it's been a long time. But after those 2 weeks, last week, NBC News reported that there's this FBI filter team that is going through all the information that they collected. So that's how they sorted out the passport. They found Trump's passports that weren't relevant to this search, and those were returned. A little bit of a complicating factor here is that most of these documents that were seized are supposed to be held by the National Archives. They're not supposed to be in Trump's possession. So I'm curious to see how many things end up getting returned to Trump actually here, because I think that that's the normal set of circumstances in these cases when you have a filter team, is that information that is protected by attorney-client privilege or that was not relevant to the scope of the search warrant is returned to the individual at issue here. But that might be a little bit complicated. But essentially, they're going to go through all these documents. Trump's team has made this claim that they're going to ask for an outside team to sort of do this process, but they're pretty far. The FBI is pretty far into this process already. So the idea of a special master coming in at this point doesn't necessarily seem all that likely, given how deep that they are already into the search process. If they had wanted that special master, that was something they probably should have asked for immediately after the search warrant, Savannah.
All right. So, Danny, on Friday, the former Vice President Mike Pence, he told reporters he did not take any classified information when he left office. How significant is an assertion like that from the vice president?
It's significant if you are still one of the people out there residing under a rock who does not know that the president or the vice president cannot take documents from the White House, that they are covered by the Presidential Records Act. But otherwise, what is between the lines in Pence's statement is more of a, look, I didn't take any documents. Trump might have done that. I mean, you can read that as an inference just from what he's saying. He isn't saying, hey, leave Trump alone. Hey, it's no big deal. He could have said things like that, but he didn't. And that goes a long way towards saying, look, I complied with the law as I saw it. Whatever Trump did over in the Oval Office or in the West Wing, I have no idea. And I think that's a very significant non-statement that you can draw inferences from.
Right, absolutely. Ryan, let's bring you back in here. And I actually want to switch over to the January 6th investigation. First, I want us all to take a listen to what Congresswoman Liz Cheney said when asked if Pence would testify in front of the House committee.
He has clearly, as he's expressed, concerns about executive privilege. But I also think that when the country has been through something as grave as this was, everyone who has information has an obligation to step forward. So I would hope that he will do that.
So you think we'll see him here in September in this room?
I would hope that, well, I would hope that he will understand how important it is for the American people to know every aspect of the truth about what happened that day.
Ryan, what do you make of those comments from Cheney?
I mean, they're significant. I do think that there is a ticking timeline here because, of course, the hearings are going to be held in September. But really, there's an expiration date on this committee, and they still have to put out the final report. So I don't, we could always see there's always the possibility of additional public hearings after these ones that are happening in September. But I think it's sort of a jump ball right now whether or not Mike Pence is actually going to end up publicly testifying in a televised forum as we as we might expect in September or potentially after that, Savannah.
So, Danny, is a subpoena likely the only way we're going to see the former vice president testify, a subpoena from the House committee?
It's the only way, but it's not necessarily a successful way. In other words, just because Pence may be subpoenaed doesn't mean he's going to show up. There are a number of different ways he might oppose the subpoena, and if he does, he can run out the clock, just like Ryan described. There is a ticking clock on this committee's work. So whether or not Pence appears, I think will require a subpoena, but he does not necessarily show up even if subpoenaed. Not that he defies it, but that he may fight it or show up in some limited capacity. But then, even if he does, the next question is, what is his testimony going to yield in a hearing setting? Or will it just be a pre-taped deposition that they show excerpts of?
Absolutely. Danny Savalas, Ryan Riley, thank you so much.
This morning, parts of North Texas are under a flash flood warning as a serious storm system moves east. Take a look at the scene in Dallas, which saw about 8 inches of rain overnight. You can see cars submerged in floodwaters there this morning. NBC News meteorologist Michelle Grossman will have more on that in a moment. This all comes after a weekend of flash.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.